Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we are going to be talking about the mind-boggling bridge between science and spirituality that is coherence. So, coherence in physics is when waves start to synchronize and be in harmony. Incoherence looks like a whole bunch of different sounds that are happening all at different times, whereas coherence, all of the waves are aligned. Coherence happens oftentimes if you've ever tuned a stringed instrument, you can hear this is two things that are in tune with each other, so therefore they are in coherence. They are the same tune, or they are octaves or something like that. You can hear when the waves are in coherence even with your own ears. But at its core, coherence doesn't just have to be sound waves. We can see that coherence exists within other types of waveforms, and if the entire world is made out of photons, light waves, or sound waves, or EM waves, which is what many things in our universe are made up of, there's an opportunity for us to have coherence with all sorts of things all the time. So what we're going to do is we're first going to explain a little bit more about the science of coherence. So we have inside us an autonomic nervous system. This autonomic nervous system has this remarkable capability to be able to be a conductor. We have two in particular nervous systems that we're very familiar with, the parasympathetic, which is in charge of relaxation, and the sympathetic, which is in charge of the stress or the fight or flight response. So when we recognize that these two different systems are effectively conducting all the messages that are going inside our bodies, their conducting is oftentimes separated. Another way that you can think of this, and another system that exists within our physiological system, is the mind and what is going on in our mind, which is the firing of neurons, the firing of synapses within our brains, and then the electrical system that exists within our heart, which is actually a stronger system than the brain. And so what we recognize is that as these are both firing, whether it's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, or it's the heart and the brain, all of them are constantly firing and kind of conducting their own instrument sections within a general symphony that is our body. If we had one conductor in this system, we can imagine that the physiological benefits of this would be great, right? We can see how we might have more clarity, we might have better health, and we might not be fighting against ourselves with one thing happening on one thing, another system wanting to do this thing. And we can actually recognize that there's a lot of benefit to that. The way that we start to recognize that coherence can be measured within the body is in something called heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is all about measuring, in particular, the autonomic nervous system and how well it's talking to itself, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The higher your heart rate variability, the higher incoherence that you are. So, that's some of the science behind what we're talking about. We're talking about coherence internally as a process of becoming in tune with itself. But the question is, how do we pull this into spirituality? So spirituality says that there, in general, is a concept that says that there may be something that is greater than myself, right? Whether that's a higher power, whether that's a God, whether that's anything along those lines, you're admitting that there's something greater than you in the universe. And yet, what we start to recognize is that so often we are countermanding spirituality because we're trying to think about it too much, or we're trying to do something about it. And what we start to recognize is that what if spirituality at its core was simply an understanding of a force that exists within the universe that we are meant to join in coherence with? Okay, so obviously spirituality can go the entire gamut of everything that is there. But what I'm saying is that if there was a greater organizing and unifying force within the universe, what would happen if we were to not only become in coherence with ourselves, but to become in coherence with that other thing, with that greater force, with a more organized force. So in other words, using the same symphony example, imagine that we have 4 or 5 or 10 different symphonies that are going on inside of us at any given point. We are effectively a multiverse inside of us. So imagine if that multiverse then became synced up with itself, and it became, yes, we're all talking together, everything's great. But then you start to realize, okay, so great, you're off on your own. You're in a situation where you are creating coherence with yourself. But how do you know that that is the best possible coherence of what you could be in coherence with? You could be in coherence with your environment. Perhaps you're in a really chaotic environment. You start to sync up internally, but you are syncing up to the environment that you're in. Perhaps you are syncing up to a person that you're always around all the time, right? And you're always feeling their emotions. And so you become deeply in sync with yourself and them. Most of the time when we refer to coherence, especially when it's work that the Heart Math Institute has done, we are referring to the coherence, which I would call greater balanced coherence, which is a coherence with a higher force, which is a coherence with a greater force that is more organized, more loving, more compassionate, and more gracious, and has more gratitude than we have when we are in coherence with things that are not for our best and highest good, or not necessarily a great experience to have coherence with. So when the work that, for instance, the Heart Math Institute does with the experience of finding that greater coherence, we find that when people are able to find coherence with that greater force then starts to permeate the environment around them, right? So a lot of the work that the Heart Math Institute does is trying to validate heart rate variability as a way of measuring coherence with the environment. And then not only measuring how it is coherent with the environment, but also how it is affecting the environment around it. Not only that, but what happens when groups of people form individual coherence with themselves, with that greater force? What happens to the entire environment around them when that happens? So this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to coherence. And we're going to have more videos along those lines, because my greatest joy in life is being able to bring all of the spiritual teachings that I understand down to the practical human level of how is it that you are actually dealing with this in your life. So one of the things I'm going to teach right now is a quick coherence method. And this quick coherence method, it sounds exactly as you would expect it to do. It's something that was developed by the Heart Math Institute, and it is one of the best ways to get in coherence with yourself. You do have to find some calmness, you do have to find some quiet, and that's great. Okay, so what you do, close your eyes. And what we're doing is, instead of imagining that we're breathing in through our nose and our mouth, very head-centered idea, coherence is all about the heart and how the heart is actually the dominant system inside the body, that we need to be given the reins. So what we do is we imagine, as we close our eyes and breathe in, that we are breathing directly into our chest. And by directly breathing into our chest, we are emphasizing the fact that we are trusting that the heart is actually the one who's going to lead us to the greater coherence with that greater force. Once we do this for a moment, then we can start to incorporate more and more different feelings. Gratitude, compassion, whatever high frequency or fast frequency of love, some currency of love, gratitude, compassion, or just love that you want to breathe directly into your chest, that's what we're going to be doing. So do that now. Breathe in through your chest. Breathe gratitude directly into your chest. You can think of gratitude as the lack of anxiety. It's a full acceptance of the now and how everything is now. And even if you don't have a heart rate variability monitor, what you start to feel, the more that you do this, the more you allow your body to relax, is you start to develop a sense of peace and a sense of unity with your surroundings. It's almost as if something else has taken over, and that is helping you to become more organized. There's so much more with coherence, and we will cover future episodes with more about it. But the most important thing to recognize is that we are instruments. We are playing sound all the time. We are constantly emitting waves. And we have an ability to synchronize those waves. And we have an ability to synchronize those waves in much, much simpler techniques than you could ever imagine. By centering the mind, by simply breathing gratitude directly into your chest. That's pretty easy, right? Maybe it's easier said than done, but just keep reminding yourself if your attention goes away, and keep reminding yourself exactly what it feels like to find this moment of coherence. I'm Christina Wiltsey. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.
Hey everyone, if you found this video helpful and you enjoy science, spirituality, history, movies, all of those things as they get folded into spirituality, please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we will love to have you for our next adventure in practical spirituality.